Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to be exploring some themes and some lessons from a children's book.
A children's book?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called Two Wise Men, and it's basically a collection of short stories that are inspired by Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger.
Wow.
So pretty interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like these big investment thinkers and then this children's book.
Very cool.
But what I thought was interesting is that the book uses these simple stories to kind of illustrate some pretty profound life lessons.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's so powerful about stories. They can take these really complex ideas and make them accessible and engaging for anyone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So the first story that really caught my eye was Lost and Found, the Kohinoor Diamond. Have you heard of the Kohinoor Diamond?
I have, yeah. It's got quite a history.
Yeah. So in this story, three friends, they find what they believe is a piece of this legendary diamond. Yeah, and they get all excited, and they end up meeting this stranger who spins them a tale about the diamond. And they're so eager to believe him that they end up trading something valuable for what turns out to be a worthless stone.
That's a classic mistake, isn't it? Getting caught up in the excitement and not thinking critically.
Yeah, and I think the story does a really good job of highlighting this human tendency that we all have to kind of jump to conclusions, especially when we think we know something.
Right. It's like we get blinded by our own perceived knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information, it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking we're experts on everything.
Absolutely. We have to be careful not to let information overload turn into a lack of critical thinking.
For sure. So the story really serves as a reminder to pause and question our assumptions and to really embrace the fact that learning is a continuous process.
It's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, and I think the choice of the Kohinoor Diamond as the central element to the story is really clever.
I agree. It adds a whole other layer of meaning. It's not just about believing strangers. It's about our relationship with knowledge itself.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It makes me think about all the times I might have missed crucial details or made hasty decisions just because I assumed I knew enough.
We've all been there.
Yeah, and it can apply to anything from investing to making everyday choices.
Absolutely. Speaking of important choices, there's another theme that runs through several of these stories, the importance of building and protecting your reputation.
Yeah, and the story that really drove this point home for me was A Teacher's Dilemma.
That one was tough.
Yeah, it really was. It's about this physics teacher, Mr. Ramshankar, who's been teaching for 20 years and has a great reputation in his community.
Right, well respected.
Yeah, but then he gets pressured by some parents to tutor their kids for extra money.
Oh, that's a tricky situation.
It is. And he knows that the school wouldn't approve of him doing this, but he's tempted by the offer.
It's a classic ethical dilemma.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he ends up giving in. He accepts what amounts to a bribe, and it instantly tarnishes his reputation.
It's heartbreaking to see how quickly years of hard work can be undone by one bad decision.
It is. And the story doesn't shy away from the consequences. Mr. Ramshankar is forced to leave his hometown and start over somewhere else.
It's a stark reminder that even seemingly small actions can have huge ripple effects.
Exactly. It's like that saying, it takes years to build trust and only seconds to destroy it.
So true. And in today's world where news travels so fast, it's more important than ever to be mindful of our actions and the impact they can have on our reputation.
Absolutely. So we've got acknowledging the limits of our knowledge and safeguarding our reputations. Two Wise Men is already packing a punch, and we've only just begun.
I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover.
Me too. This is proving to be a much deeper dive than I expected.
That's the beauty of these stories. They might seem simple on the surface, but they hold so much wisdom beneath.
Absolutely. All right, let's keep going. I'm really curious to see where these stories take us next.
Let's do it. You know, one thing that really stood out to me as we were talking about reputation and long-term thinking was the theme of self-investment in the book.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There were a couple of stories that really touched on that.
Yeah, like The New School. Remember that one?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
So it's about this young girl, Harini, who's super excited about going to boarding school.
Yeah.
And she's also really eager to help her housemaid son, Jeevan, learn English.
Right, so she wants to teach him.
Yeah. But her father gives her some really wise advice.
Oh, what's that?
He basically tells her that she needs to focus on her own education first.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, he explains that by becoming independent and really mastering the language herself, she'll be in a much stronger position to teach Jeevan later on.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about being selfish. It's about recognizing that sometimes the best way to help others is to invest in yourself first.
So it's a form of strategic giving.
Yeah, I like that, strategic giving. That's a great way to put it.
Yes. It's about maximizing your own potential so you can contribute more meaningfully to the lives of those around you.
And that can apply to so many different areas of life.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Whether it's education or skill development or even just personal growth, investing in yourself is an investment in your ability to make a positive impact on the world.
It makes me think about the concept of effective altruism. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I have. It's the idea of using evidence and reasoning to figure out the most effective ways to help others.
Right. And sometimes the most effective way to help others is to focus on your own growth first.
Yeah, so you can have a bigger impact later on.
Exactly. Now, another theme that I found really compelling was the idea of hard work and deserving success.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic.
It is.
Yeah.
But the way it was presented in the two new restaurants in town was really interesting.
Tell me about it.
So the story follows these two cousins, Mohan and Gopal, who both open restaurants in a new town.
Okay, so they're both in the same business.
Yeah, but they have very different approaches.
How so?
Mohan is super dedicated and hardworking.
Okay.
He puts in long hours. He's always striving to improve his recipes and his service. He's just really committed to making his restaurant a success.
Sounds like a classic entrepreneur.
He is. And Gopal, on the other hand, takes a much more laid-back approach.
Oh, so he's not as driven.
Yeah, he's more interested in taking shortcuts and cutting corners. He thinks he can just coast by on his charm and his family name.
Oh, that doesn't sound like a recipe for success.
And it's not. The story shows how Mohan's hard work pays off, while Gopal's laziness ultimately leads to his downfall.
So it's a pretty clear message about the importance of effort and dedication.
Yeah, it's a reminder that success isn't just handed to you. You have to earn it through hard work and perseverance.
It's about aligning your actions with your aspirations.
Exactly. And Mohan's story is really inspiring. It shows that even when you face setbacks and challenges, if you keep pushing forward and stay focused on your goals, you can achieve great things.
It's a good reminder for all of us.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, now for something completely different, let's talk about the story. The Dora Doll birthday party.
Oh, yeah. What was that one about again?
It's about this little girl named Lavanya who gets invited to her first birthday party.
Oh, how cute.
It is, but it takes a bit of a bittersweet turn.
Really? How so?
Well, at first, Lavanya is super excited about the party.
I bet. She's probably never been to one before.
Right? And she's really focused on all the material aspects of it, like the presents, the decorations, the cake, all the things kids usually get excited about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But as the party goes on, she starts to feel kind of disillusioned
Why is that?
because she realizes that all the fancy stuff doesn't really matter that much.
I see.
What she really wants is to feel connected to her friends and to have her parents' love and support.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
It is. It's a reminder that true happiness comes from genuine connections and experiences, not from material possessions.
It's a powerful message, especially in today's consumerist society.
Yeah, we're constantly bombarded with messages telling us that we need to buy more stuff to be happy. But this story shows that that's just not true.
It's about recognizing the difference between what we want and what we truly need.
Yeah, and I think it's a message that's relevant for people of all ages, not just kids.
Absolutely. We can all get caught up in the pursuit of material things sometimes.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters.
This story is a good reminder to step back and reevaluate our priorities.
I agree. Now, switching gears a bit, let's talk about the story The Banana Tree.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. It was pretty funny.
It was. So it's about this incredibly lazy boy named Sreenath.
How lazy are we talking?
He's so lazy that he would rather wait for a banana to fall from the tree into his mouth than get up and pick one himself.
Oh my gosh. That's next level laziness.
It is. It's obviously an exaggeration for comedic effect, but I think we can all relate to those moments where we just don't feel like putting in the effort.
Yeah, for sure. We all have our lazy days.
Right. But what's interesting about this story is that Sreenath eventually learns the importance of taking initiative.
Oh, how does that happen?
Well, through a series of events, he's basically forced to confront his laziness.
That's good for him.
And he realizes that even small actions can make a big difference.
So it's about the power of small steps.
Yeah, and the importance of consistency.
It's like that saying, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we don't need to make drastic changes overnight to see progress. Just start with small steps and keep building on them.
I love that. It's a very encouraging message.
It is. It shows that change is possible, even for the most reluctant among us.
Now, speaking of things that can be hard to change, let's talk about habits.
Oh, yeah, those can be tricky.
They can, and the story, the new video game, does a great job at illustrating how easily habits can take root and control our lives.
That one really resonated with me, especially today's digital age where it's so easy to get hooked on screens.
Yeah, it's a very relevant story.
So it's about this boy named Raju who becomes completely consumed by a new video game.
Okay, I can see where this is going.
He starts neglecting his studies, his chores, his friends, everything.
He's letting the game take over his life.
Yeah, and it starts to have a really negative impact on his well-being.
It's a classic example of how something that seems harmless at first can quickly become an addiction.
Yeah, and I think the story is really a metaphor for any kind of addictive behavior, whether it's video games or social media or anything else that starts to consume our time and energy.
It's about recognizing the patterns of addictive behavior and taking steps to break free.
It's a reminder that we have the power to shape our own lives by cultivating positive habits and breaking free from those that are holding us back.
It's all about making conscious choices.
Now let's shift gears again and talk about the importance of learning from others.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
It is. And the story, The Earth Revolves Around the Sun, provides a really interesting perspective on this.
I'm curious. Tell me more.
So it's about this student named Shanti who initially doubts the scientific fact that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive at first, right?
I guess so, especially if you're just looking at it from your own perspective on Earth.
Exactly. But through her teacher's guidance, Shanti eventually comes to understand and accept this scientific truth.
So her teacher helps her see the bigger picture.
Yeah, and the story uses a really clever analogy to illustrate this concept.
What's the analogy?
It talks about India's successful satellite launch
Oh, okay.
and how that achievement was only possible because scientists built upon the knowledge and discoveries of those who came before them.
Right. They were standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly. And it's the same with any field of knowledge. We don't have to
Yeah.
figure everything out on our own. We can learn from the experiences and insights of others.
So it's about recognizing the value of mentorship and guidance.
Yeah, and it's also about having the humility to admit when we don't know something and to be open to learning from others.
It's a lifelong journey.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of individuals who inspire us to learn and grow, let's talk about the theme of heroes.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It is. And the story, My Dad's Hero, explores this in a really interesting way.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So it's about this boy named Hitesh, whose hero is the Buddha.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And he admires the Buddha for his compassion and his teachings on peace and kindness.
That makes sense. The Buddha is a pretty inspiring figure.
Yes. And one day, Hitesh decides to give a small statue of the Buddha to his friend Mansa as a symbol of their friendship.
Oh, that's sweet.
It is. But what's really interesting about the story is that it also reveals a bit about Hitesh's father's past.
Oh, what is his father like?
Well, it turns out that Hitesh's father used to be quite a prankster when he was younger.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was known for playing tricks on people and getting into trouble.
So not exactly a role model for his son?
Right. But then something changed. He discovered the teachings of the Buddha, and it had a profound impact on him.
He found a new hero.
He did. And it inspired him to become a better person.
So it's a story about redemption and the power of positive role models.
Exactly. It shows that our heroes can evolve as we grow and learn.
And that even people who have made mistakes in the past can find inspiration and change their ways.
It's a really hopeful message.
It is. It reminds us that we all have the potential to become better versions of ourselves.
Now let's talk about a theme that can be a bit uncomfortable, but is nonetheless important to address envy.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
It is. And the story, The Bungalow on the Corner of the Street, tackles this head on.
What's the story about?
It's about this family, the Sharmas, who become incredibly envious of their new neighbors, the Tripithis.
What are they envious of?
Well, the Tripithis have just moved into this big, beautiful bungalow.
Okay, so they have a nicer house?
Yeah, and the Sharmas start comparing themselves to the Tripithis and feeling really inadequate.
I can see how that would happen. It's easy to get caught up in comparisons, especially when it comes to material possessions.
Yeah, and the story does a great job of showing how destructive envy can be.
It can really poison your thoughts and make you miserable.
It can. And it often leads to resentment and unhappiness, even when you have plenty to be grateful for.
It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
It's so true. And what I found interesting about the story is that it contrasts Mrs. Sharma's perspective with Mr. Sharma's.
How so?
Well, Mrs. Sharma is completely consumed by envy. She's constantly obsessing over the Tripitha's possessions and wishing they had the same things.
She's letting it eat her up.
She is.
Yeah.
But Mr. Sharma has a much more grounded perspective.
What's his take on this situation?
He tries to remind his wife that they have a lot to be thankful for, and that true happiness comes from appreciating what you have rather than constantly comparing yourself to others.
He's got a good head on his shoulders.
He does.
Mm.
And I think his perspective is really important. It's a reminder that we can choose to focus on gratitude rather than envy.
And that's a much healthier and happier way to live.
Absolutely. Now, as we wrap up our discussion of Two Wise Men, I want to talk about one last story that really stood out to me. The Syrup Ice Cream Man.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. It was a nice little story.
It was. And it highlights an important concept that I think is relevant for all of us, the difference between price and value.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
It is. So the story is told from the perspective of a child who's reminiscing about his childhood.
Okay.
And he remembers how his father used to buy him and his friends syrup ice creams after school every day.
Oh, that's a sweet memory.
It is. And it wasn't just about the ice cream itself. It was about the whole experience.
The simple pleasures.
Yeah. The walk home from school, the anticipation of the treat, the friendly interaction with the ice cream man. It was all part of what made it so special.
Right. It was about the value of the experience, not just the price of the ice cream.
Exactly. But then as the years went by, the price of ice cream started to go up.
Inflation strikes again.
And the father in the story starts to reflect on how this change in price has also changed the experience.
How so?
Well, he can still afford to buy the ice cream, but it's not the same anymore.
It's lost some of its magic.
Yeah. The walks have become shorter, the treats have become smaller, and the connection with the ice cream man isn't as strong.
So the value has diminished even though the price has increased.
Exactly. And I think this is a really powerful analogy for our lives in general.
How so?
We often get caught up in chasing bigger and better things, thinking that if we just spend more money, we'll be happier.
The allure of the upgrade.
Yeah. But this story reminds us that sometimes the simpler things, the experiences that don't cost a lot of money, are the ones that truly enrich our lives.
It's about recognizing the difference between what we're paying for and what we're actually getting.
And I think it's a call to be more mindful about our spending habits.
To really think about the value we're getting from our purchases.
Are we spending money on things that align with our values and bring us lasting satisfaction? Or are we just accumulating stuff that we don't really need and that won't make us truly happy?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
It is. And I think the Syrup Ice Cream Man does a brilliant job of illustrating this point in a way that's both relatable and thought-provoking.
I agree. It's a great way to end our discussion of Two Wise Men.
It is. We've covered so much ground today, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of all the wisdom contained in these stories.
Me too. It's amazing how much depth and insight you can find in a children's book.
It really is. And I think it's a testament to the power of storytelling.
Stories have a way of connecting with us on a deeper level and making complex ideas more accessible and engaging.
And they can stay with us long after we've finished reading them.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Okay. I'm listening.
If you could choose one lesson from Two Wise Men to apply to your own life right now, which one would it be and why?
That's a great question. It really makes you think about all the different things we've explored today.
And how they might resonate with our own personal experiences and challenges.
I'm curious to hear what our listeners come up with.
Me too. Well, I think it's safe to say that Two Wise Men has given us a lot to chew on today.
It has. And I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. It's a delightful read that's both entertaining and insightful.
And it's a reminder that valuable lessons can be found in the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Two Wise Men.
It's been a pleasure exploring these stories with you.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
And as we wrap up our exploration of Two Wise Men, let's not forget the final story, The Syrup Ice Cream Man, which beautifully illustrates the crucial difference between price and value.
Oh, yeah. This one, I really like this story. It's told from the perspective of a kid remembering simpler times when his dad could afford to buy him and his friends syrup ice creams after school. You know,
Yeah.
just a simple little treat.
Yeah, those little everyday joys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really about the ice cream. It was about the whole experience, the walk home from school, the anticipation, the little chats with the ice cream man.
Yeah, all those things that add up to more than just the thing itself.
Exactly. It was about the value of the whole experience, not just the price of the ice cream.
Right. And then as the story goes on, the father starts to think about how the rising cost of the ice cream has actually kind of changed the whole thing.
Yeah. It's not just about the price. It's about how that price increase has changed the whole experience.
Yeah, like what used to be a simple, affordable treat is now something more expensive and maybe a little less special.
Right, like maybe the walks are shorter now, the treats are smaller, the connection with the ice cream man isn't quite the same.
So the value of the experience has gone down, even though the price has gone up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I think that's such a great analogy for so many things in life.
totally. Like we always think that if we just get that next thing or spend a little more money, we'll be happier.
Right, the bigger house, the fancier car,
Yeah.
the latest gadget.
But sometimes it's the simple things, the things that don't cost a lot, that really make us happy.
Yeah, the time with loved ones, the experiences that create memories, the things that money can't really buy.
It's about being mindful of what we're spending our money on and making sure it's actually giving us something valuable in return.
I think that's a great takeaway from this story. It's a call to really examine our spending habits and ask ourselves if we're buying things that actually align with our values and bring us lasting joy.
Yeah. And maybe sometimes it's worth it to pay a little more for something if it truly enhances our lives.
Right. But we should always be aware of the difference between price and value and make sure we're not just chasing after things that won't ultimately make us happy.
It's about finding that balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we've come to the end of our journey through two wise men.
It's been an amazing exploration.
It really has. We've covered so much ground, from the importance of lifelong learning and protecting our reputations to the power of self-investment and gratitude. And it's all come from these simple yet profound children's stories.
It's a reminder that wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to the power of storytelling to convey complex ideas in a way that's both engaging and memorable.
So before we sign off, I'd like to leave our listeners with one final question to ponder.
Okay, hit me with it.
If you could choose one lesson from two wise men to apply to your own life right now, which one would it be and why?
That's a great question. It really challenges us to think about how these stories can impact our own lives.
Yeah. And it might be different for everyone depending on their own personal experiences and challenges.
I know I'm going to be thinking about that question myself.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure exploring two wise men with you.
Likewise, I highly recommend this book to anyone who's looking for a dose of wisdom and inspiration.
It's a reminder that learning can be fun and that valuable lessons can be found anywhere.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep learning, and keep those minds open.